Recording in progress. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are starting this evening's program. I would respectfully ask for us to be upstanding whilst the speaker and the chair take the high table. I humbly ask also that we put our mobile phones on silent. Thank you.
President of the Academy, past presidents, vice presidents, past vice presidents, fellows of the Academy, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the fellows of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, Ghana's premier learning society, I warmly welcome you all to day 2 of our 3-day lecture, making the 57th in the series since 1968. The J.B. DANQUAH Memorial Lecture Series was initiated or instituted in 1968 in memory of a foundation member of the Academy, Dr. Joseph DANQUAH, who died in prison in February 1965, fighting for freedom in all its manifestations. The event consists of a series of 3 lectures delivered on varying themes ranging from law, philosophy, literature, medicine, health, religion, nation building, and what have you. Kindly note that this event is being streamed live on the Academy's Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook platforms. I continue, ladies and gentlemen, by introducing the chairperson for this evening's function. He is in the person of Professor Joseph ROLAND ATSU, who is also the Vice President for the Arts Section of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. Professor ATSU was elected Fellow of the Academy in 2005 and served as Assistant Honorary Secretary in the Arts Section, and also an Honorary Treasurer later on in 2016 to 2017. Professor AYEE was the occupant of the UNESCO United Nations Nations University Leadership Academy Chair in Leadership Studies of the University of Jordan in 2001, and the Emeka Anyauku Visiting Chair of Commonwealth Studies in the Institute of Commonwealth Studies of the University of London in 2013. He served as a member of a team of experts that drafted Ghana's National Decentralization Policy Framework and Action Plan for 2015 to 2019, and the National Decentralization Policy and Strategy for 2020 to 2024. Professor AYEE is a prolific writer with over 200 publications in several areas of political science, public policy, and administration. His current research interests include higher education governance and management, policy and institutional responses to COVID-19, and political institutions and public sector management in Ghana's Fourth Republic. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Professor Joseph Roland ATSU AYEE to take the chair.
President of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, past presidents, vice presidents, our distinguished speaker, the fellows of the Academy, my dear students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We had a very interesting lecture yesterday on the confused dream. And to me, the confused dream is about the preparedness of Africans for independence and the contradiction between Western civilization and values and African civilization and values. And the speaker emphasized a very important point, that we must take our history and culture and society seriously, or more seriously. But one thing which was with me, even when I was driving home, was the fact that he gave us a challenge, and the challenge of Africanizing our disciplines. And anywhere I go, people will say, you say you are a political scientist, have you developed a traditional governance system, for the country? So, very interesting, and day 2 will be more interesting, experiencing the nightmare. When people talk about nightmare, they are talking about very horrific dreams. And I think our experience, I hope, is not as horrific as nightmare. But the speaker will tell us that. So our speaker, very distinguished indeed, is Nana Kobina Nketsia the 5th. He is the paramount chief Omanhen of the Essikado British Sekondi traditional area in the western region of Ghana, and serves as the president of the Traditional Council. A product of Infant Film School, he obtained his first degree in modern history from the University of Ghana, and later earned a Doctor of Philosophy in African History from the University of Calabar in Nigeria. His areas of interest include Pan-Africanism, African culture and religion, governance, law, and philosophy. He is the author of African Culture in Governance and Development, The Ghana Paradigm, 2013, which was published by the Ghana University Press. Nana Nketsia the 5th has chaired many important organizations and committees, including the Ghana Museums and Monuments Board, the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, and the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum Governing Board. He was a member of the Public Emoluments Committee and honorary member of the Railway Workers Union. He has also been involved with the Global African Family Reunion International Council, GAFRIC, a Pan-African reparatory justice, which is a body committed of chiefs, elders, and other indigenous African community leaders. The National Festival of Arts and Culture, NAFAC, the Public Utilities and Regulatory Commission, PURC, the Volta River Authority, and the African Regional Conference on Education for Cultural Heritage Development by UNESCO. He has, in recent times, been outspoken on the ramifications of illegal mining on the people and heritage of Ghana, and has spared no opportunity to join advocacy against Galamsey. Audience, I now present to you the distinguished speaker, Nana Kobina Nketsia the 5th.
chair, my fellow Vandal, old Vandal. We were lucky to have gone to the University of Commonwealth. The president, hey, Prof. Kofi Akosa. How do they say it? Fellows and members or whatever. And the young ones. Yesterday we spoke English, but today I'll move to Ghana in honor of a very special brother who is here. But if my guy is bad, it will move to Fante. We are now going to experience the nightmare. And if anybody is my age and doesn't know what the nightmare is about, then I wonder when we'll get out of this. But this is 2024 again, like I said yesterday. And I keep meditating that the only practice that I have, it used to be football and other games, but now it's only humility that I try to practice. So coming here, I still feel quite uncomfortable, especially the fact that I consider myself an awakened African. You remember in 1957, when Ghana was on Ghana's Independence Eve, Nkrumah made a very beautiful statement. He said, "We have awakened, and we shall sleep no more." And I always tell people who woke up and fell into a coma the following day. So I hope that we will get out of this coma. But as I said, I'll be dropping relationships with Dr. J.B. DANQUAH as we go on. Now, in 1950, there were negotiations between the British oppressors and my family to have my late uncle, who had been arrested, released from detention. Well, they had to come and do something. I don't want to go into details here. But the negotiations broke down. And so my predecessor was going to be charged to court for treason. Now, can't you see it's absurd? An Omanhen on his own land. You see, people don't understand. I tell you that you don't understand what colonialism or occupation means. An Omanhen on his own land, and you are charging him for treason. But anyway, Ares Blay stepped in and directed my family to go and meet Dr. J.B. DANQUAH. So it was Dr. J.B. DANQUAH who got him a lawyer to defend him in a very farcical trial, which details I don't want to go into. But I've always been very grateful for that particular thing. Two, my intellectual hero, those of you who know me, is Kobina Sechi, W-E-G Sechi. And I enjoy, just like I told you about the tribute Pa Grant wrote, not Pa Grant, the tribute that Dr. DANQUAH wrote, that Pa Grant was the Moses of Ghana's editorial yesterday. I like what he wrote. In fact, in 1956, we lost two great men in this country just before independence. One was Pa Grant, and the other one was Kobina Sechi. And so this was published in the Graphic, Daily Graphic, of June 22, 1956. And he said, "And if you think you are an African, please," I didn't say Ghanaian, listen carefully. Mr. Kobina Sechi's death has deprived the Gold Coast of a great soul. Great in the sense that in all his public and private acts was not actuated by personal gain, personal ambition, and love for power, but by the purest of motive to preserve our great inheritances without blemish and to pass them unimpaired to succeeding generations. This particular tribute inspires me to be committed more to Africa than ever before. And I hope that we have the young ones here and you take this to your heart. Interestingly, I have been thinking about DANQUAH and Sechi, not Sabado, because of certain challenges which are nightmarish. They're quite there, but a lot of people don't know how bad it is. There was an innocuous ruling by Ghana's Supreme Court, following the logic of the Eurocentric worldview, but which, I tell you, an English colonialist will probably hesitate and shudder at making. He said, "It is no offense to refuse to honor the call of your chief to attend to an issue. Accordingly, chiefs do not have the power of civil or criminal summons." Remember the thing that went on between Anaje and Pofu, this is the Attorney General, including the President of the House of Chiefs. Now, it's just there, it's in beautiful English and it's lying down. But in two very simple sentences, a culturally dreadful and unthinkable revolution had been carried out by a supposedly African Supreme Court, which is mind-boggling. First, the power and role of communal rights, obligations, and responsibilities, which are the foundation of an African's cultural existence, had been swept aside. Very revolutionary. Two, traditions and worldview, which form the basis of identity and values of any community, had been swept away through the logic of an African jurisprudence. The philosophy of law, as enshrined in the unwritten and culturally grounded constitutions of indigenous Africa, had unwittingly been pushed into the dustbin. The ramifications of this ruling is set to destroy the basis of indigenous African institutions of governance and social relationships. The day I read this, I don't want to mention the name of my friend who read this out, I was shocked that an African could do this to himself, following the logic of Europe. And the law, which doesn't belong to us, we have adopted and using it to cause more confusion in the country. And I'm glad that today's chair is a lawyer. You know, the ruling also reveals how the seeds of miseducation implanted in the mind through colonialism may bloom into unwitting self-hate and self-destruction. Obviously, the ruling does not take into account the who and what a chief is to his community or culture. As a human office, symbolizing the community and the principle of communal power, as well as rights enshrined in African culture, a chief's invitation, summons, or call is sacred. I'm not called Nana for nothing. On the 13th of February, Ghana Web published, this year, 24, published that Otumfo Amwa Sasaku and the Chofo-Iman Traditional Council had voiced their rejection of a candidate proposed as chief executive by the current president of Ghana. I do not want to go into the various shades of the worrying shades of the implications regarding this story. However, for the purpose of this nightmarish paper, their rejection was based on 2-year disregard or disrespect for a traditional council invitation. Nonetheless, it brings home the effect of this Europeanized Supreme Court ruling. It coughs up the idea of cultural illiteracy. In one fell swoop, well, I think I've said that, and culturally renders them, well, through judicial logic rooted in European culture, this ruling disempowers hamlets, villages, and the Oman, and culturally renders them lawless as the wisdom of Africa's ancestors were invalidated. Recently, as another illustration, the Kumasi Traditional Council requested an individual to appear before it. Fortunately, this was also highlighted by the Ghanaian media because of the political personality involved. Whenever I view such tragedy, I contemplate on what J.M. Saba, J.E. Kesley Hayford, Kobina Sechi, and J.B. DANQUAH, members of the European Eurocentric legal profession who were very conscious of culture would have said. I'm quite confident that they would have been guided by the sayings that if you know yourself, you do not need or wait for another person, an alien, to teach you how to eat your mother's food. And also the fact that you don't use your left hand to show or point to your origins. Respectfully, one may query the Supreme Court, what was or is the purpose of the African quest for independence? Perhaps the independence of this African space was to transform its African inhabitants into black Englishmen. Interestingly, as I said earlier, yesterday, the Akan who were there and were affected, not even the GAAS, some of them are in Côte d'Ivoire. And I wonder what they are thinking in Côte d'Ivoire. Perhaps they too are taking the, what's the name, French law to their chests and giving the same kind of ruling. Now in East Africa, I have a very special hero called Wayaki Wahenga. The story of Wayaki, Mr. Pierre, is very interesting. There was a man called, later he became a lord, but at the time he was a captain, Lugard. Lugard went to see Wayaki, who was a Kikuyu chief, and asked him for a piece of land where they could stay, where they could stay and trade. After discussions, Wayaki agreed. And then he set rules, regulations about how they're going to live together. They agreed, but they had to seal it. So they drank each other's blood. That is the traditional way of sealing something. It means you would never do anything wrong with me, and I would never. So this is the blood oath. In fact, to us, warrior bosom. I don't know how to say it in Ghana. So they chewed the values, the abosom. And then Lugard left. Later, the people who were there started disobeying, going against the rules that had been set, going after his women, going after his crops, and so on and so forth. It led to a fight. And of course, who had the arms? The English. They had the arms. So they beat Wayaki and his people well. And what did they do? In the night, Wayaki was bleeding on the head. And they sent him, they tied him up at a Presbyterian mission. In the morning, they took him to, I'm sure that he will agree with me, I like how the English put it, a court of competent jurisdiction. So they took Wayaki to court. And in court, they sentenced him to death. Somebody was giving his land to you, just for you to come there and trade. Now you, with impunity, sentence him to death. Now, among the Kikuyu, they believe that God, Ngai, some people call him El Shaddai, lives on the mountain. So in fact, when they pray, they look at Mount Kenya and pray. So here, and then they dig a hole in the ground, and you stand upright, an elder like Wayaki, and face your God. That's how they bury them. You know, the British are very civilized, am I right? When they were coming here, it's civilization that they were bringing to people, your ancestors. Very unchristian civilization. So they dug a hole in the ground, turned Wayaki upside down, and made him face away from Mount Kenya, and buried him alive. Now, if you are Kikuyu, will you take this law and use it to bath? Whose law? What's the foundation of their law? Now you understand. The law is quiet. They are in the courts, wearing wigs and robes. Go to the Supreme Court building here in Ghana. I think, when is the president giving his State of Nation address? Is it today or tomorrow or something? Today. You'll see them there, bewigged and enrobed, and coming pompously and sitting there. Whom are they representing? You? Your ancestors? Or they are representing an alien culture? Think carefully about these things, because we are here to think, nothing more. And this, as I said yesterday, the Academy of Arts and Sciences, filled with professors and so on, who should be the thought shield of this country. In March 1957, Mr. Chair, a very interesting discussion took place here in Accra over a landmark, the Independence Arch, among other topics. Google, and I tell you that the Independence Arch was commissioned by Kwame Nkrumah. We all love the Black Star, from the diaspora to this place. And I wondered, it was commissioned. In what way was it commissioned? Now listen, the question is, why should Nkrumah commission such an un-African symbol to mark the independence of an African space? On what basis was his imagination? Secondly, symbols are a manifestation emanating from the worldview of the culture within which they are found. What kind of message, spiritual or material, was the Independence Arc transmitting, and to whom? The truth is that that arc was a gift from Great Britain. If Nkrumah had anything to do with it, I believe it must be the Black Stars, the Black Star, and I always thank God for that. Therefore, although African cultural indices mobilized Ghana's struggle for independence, European culture and heritage hijacked the victory. This is evident in the ironic use of a Roman symbol of victory. That's a Roman symbol of victory to either represent a black African nation's conquest of imperialism and express their independence from foreign culture. This Roman symbol, you all know where it is. And then you ask yourself, why? But it should tell you that imperialism had won. This discussion was that the struggle was a struggle against imperialism. And even today, imperialism is the basis of injustice, inequality, etc. And it works with the spirit of greed throughout the world. So, in a way, perhaps the British were telling us, oh, you think you won? Well, we've got a cultural victory, and that is the real victory. A friend of mine, he's dead now, but Nketsia, noted that no conqueror has won a final victory over any people unless their history and culture was destroyed. All wars of conquest ultimately are cultural wars. Conquerors must erase the memory of the conquered people. They prevent the practice of indigenous culture. They change the names of conquered peoples and places. They destroy or stigmatize the symbols of the conquered people. Successful conquerors know that history and culture is a jugular vein and Achilles tendon of a people. You know, during the Second World War, one of these German officers, generals, was in France, and he entered the place, and they were busy discussing something. I'm trying to remember the name. And he asked them, the German general asked them what they were discussing. And they told him that they were discussing culture. The guy brought out a gun and said, get out of here, because that is the tool to fight. Once your culture is taken over, you are finished. They change your names, they change this, so you think you are like them. Bridget, Abigail, Priscilla, yes, you know them, am I right? They are laughing among themselves. Clifford, you know. So these are some of the things I'm just passing out to you. So this is a nightmare, is that an assessment comes out vividly when one examines the models, institutions, ideologies, and worldview with regard to governance and development in Africa. Yesterday, Mr. Chairman, I ended with Reverend Father Sefa's. Reverend Father Sefa, I just feel sad this Nana SKB is not here today. But he's from Nana SKB's place, Asukore Mampon. But his name is legendary for his oration at Essikado. That whenever he entered the church, the Anglican church, the church was packed. People came from all over to come and listen to him. And he sang Lead Candlelight Amid the Encircling Gloom. Lead thou me on. That's where I stopped. But then, don't forget the rest of that particular verse. It says, the night is dark, and I am far from home. lead thou me on. Keep thou my feet. I do not ask to see. The distance seen, one step is enough for me. Anytime I hear the TUC singing this song, I wonder if they know the origins in Ghana. But you see, we took a step as a people. And I'm glad the young ones are here, because you must take the next step or steps. One step is not enough because of the existential pathology of Africa. Because the existential pathology of Africa today is demoralizing, dispiriting, disheartening, and dismal. All the Berlin-generated African states resemble top-security prisons with inmates enslaved and abused by empty-headed narcissists wearing culturally meaningless and ridiculous titles such as excellency, such as lordship. And sometimes you hear some people referring to themselves as learned. It means you rest are unlearned, you know, and honorable. And then some of them have been adorned with a miserably pompous label of politicians. And that label is gradually becoming despicable throughout Africa. All of us should never forget that the owners of the culture from which such titles emanated also knighted their pirates and their robbers. When Ewi Fukrampo was blessing one with swords, right senite, right this, they knew what they were doing, that they are thieves and armed robbers. Yeah. So every culture has owners. As I said yesterday, the privileged group who benefit from the existence of that way of life. Never forget it. If the current way of life is not benefiting you, then you are part of the nightmare. You are experiencing the nightmare. I could give more examples all over Africa. What was done to Robert Sobukwe? What was done to, what's his name? Mugabe? What was done to Kapwepwe? Now we don't learn about ourselves again. We are busy chasing, what's his name, Napoleon Bonaparte. Real education uncloaks this privileged group in all spheres of existence. Being educated is have an in-depth understanding of the mindset and social structures that generate or engineer criminality, poverty, wealth, and charity. I sometimes laugh. This morning I was at a meeting and I heard somebody use the word celebrity in referring to somebody. And when you call the person a celebrity, what are you celebrating? What has he or she done? And who is guiding you to think that that person or those persons are celebrities? You are there, you are young boys. Oh, that's a celebrity, no, it's nature. Hey, sometimes you can't believe that we've allowed ourselves to have our thinking things put somewhere. Never call anybody a celebrity, most especially if the person doesn't deserve it. I don't want to give examples, but think about it. A corrupt culture, for example, has ownership and beneficiaries. Real education provides a thorough analysis of the ultimate beneficiaries of a way of life and stimulates our awareness of the means and agencies used to propagate and promote the acceptance of the privileged form of existence within a society. The means. How did they do it? Who is benefiting from this? Illustratively, Mr. Chairman, there's a touch of morbid humor evaluating the members and participants of Western-inspired institutions, such as the World Economic Forum and the G7, or now they call it G8. Real education would uncloak them. And you see that they have one aim. They are there to safeguard their socio-economic domains, period. That's why they confer. So I wonder why they invite certain Africans to even move up there to prance around to show their beggary and so on and so forth. When you're head of state, any African head of state goes to those kind of summits, ask yourself, okay, then what's the person going to do there? Is he joining the pirates, those who came here to oppress us, those who have carved the world for themselves and don't want you to be part of it? All that you are is what? The supplier of, what do you call it? Resources for them. These platforms invoke a recollection of the owners of Western Europe, who had a Congress of Vampires in Berlin to set their guidelines for chopping Africa into pieces. A friend of mine, Anthony Browder, his perception is that the Africa today was created by a consortium of madmen who fabricated a reality so stark that it would make Mary Shelley's Frankenstein read like comedy. Of course, I disagree with Tony. I don't think those who fabricated Africa were mad. They knew what they were doing exactly and what they wanted. So you always need to study the heritage of Europe to understand the mindset of the owners of European culture. And you'll be very surprised. You see psychopathy in terms of relationships. You see duplicity, as well as social class and mental manipulation. And so when they were coming into Africa, the 3 C's, civilization, somebody's coming to kill you, and he says he's coming to civilize you. Christianity, somebody's coming to kill you, he says he's a Christian, who doesn't know how to turn the other cheek. And then lastly, commerce, 3 C's. But the last C, how do you have commerce when you've been colonized? You are trading with whom? The place belongs to them. An occupying power, and he says he's trading with. But you see, it wasn't about you that these vampires created those slogans. It was to mobilize their own people into supporting what they were coming to do in Africa. So the 3 C's wasn't about you sitting in Africa and thinking about Ngai, your African god, or Mauso Bolisa. You know, it was about their god who is used to manipulate them. Go to and study the history of Russia, and you see how that was done a lot of times to the serfs and those who didn't have. And that's why the revolution was so violent at the point of realization. Don't ever forget that lies do not exist for nothing. And lies do not exist in a vacuum. Lies or deception have a purpose. They are to profit those who generate them. Africans need to appreciate a culture's heritage in order to understand the psyche with its institutions and language so that they have a clear perception that confronts them. I'll say that later. But a lot of these things were manufactured by the owners of Europe's culture, you know, to get their unwritten citizenry to support them. An awakened African will only immerse themselves in unrewarding dirges, considering that a whole continent has become abysmally disempowered. Any conscious African will be motivated into action. Look, Chair, it is sad and challenging discussing leadership in Africa, or as somebody would say, so-called leadership, in almost all the fields of human enterprise, except in criminality, impunity, and the abuse of facilities, as well as institutions. Contemplating Africa's indigenous values held by the ancients of this continent, it is difficult to accept the present crop of so-called leaders. Deep down, I am convinced that these characters know that they are not worthy African leaders, or they are not worthy of African leadership. They simply do not have the awareness, the character, the qualities and abilities to lead in the first place. Generally, African socio-political, economic, and spiritual leadership appears as a body of psychologically defeated puppets. The infantile trappings. I mean, you see them. Go and look at Ruto, you know, Kenya. Go and see the convoy he carries. I don't want to bring it home, but I'm sure you understand. The infantile trappings of office and ceremonies at political functions, for example, together with the long convoys in fuel-guzzling made out of Africa vehicles, seems to be an admission of a lack of imagination, incapacity, and impotence. Possibly, these forms of leaders push the followership into the swamp of idiocy. The story of current African leadership is to trace the life of those who follow the crooked roads. I don't want to mention names that you already know already. Moise Chombe, I wonder. Chombe, Kasavubu, and Mobutu Sese Seko Wazabanga. However, you can see them and feel them. Look across the continent. It is painfully ridiculous to watch these so-called leadership troop with exaltation to ascend summits out of Africa. Rome is the latest capital to host such a summit. Before then, Beijing, London, Moscow, Brussels, New Delhi, Riyadh, and Washington, they've all had their day. All of us may respectfully ask, in what capacity can Rome summon a whole continent to its doorstep? Are you Africans here? In what capacity? Rome. No, what about in Africa, the whole continent? There's something wrong, fundamentally wrong with the continent. If you're not experiencing that nightmare, then feel it. This is the nightmare. Our human dignity has been trashed. Besides character, leaders have a vision which is shared by followers. Leadership is far beyond management. The commitment to the actualization of that vision subsumes every aspect of a leader's life. He's willing to give up even his life to get into that vision. The followers understand and envision their cultural, political, educational, and ecological destination. Properly, Mr. Chair, the generality of African leadership goes under the brand of misleadership. A misleader, I looked at Wikipedia for this one, and I started laughing. Somebody who leads his people astray, often deliberately. He's a cheat or cheater, he's a deceiver, he's slick, he's a trickster, he beguiles you. It's quite interesting. And it's cheat, the words are there. So nobody unintentionally misleads you. It is their character. They know what they are doing. It's part of their agenda. And yet, misleadership, I think that in all this, it is gobbled by the word corruption. A corrupt leadership can lead you into a world of corruption. This contributes to explain the mafia systems operating on the continent. And don't forget, yes, he has sung Bob Marley, and he said what? This is a rat race. Rats prefer darkness and rubbish. It is rewarding to read Marx's observation that the oppressed are allowed once every few years to decide which particular representatives of the oppressing class are to represent and repress them. Further for thought. Parallelly, Mr. Chair, colonialism depended on the control of coercive forces in the maintenance of colonial order, peace, and property. And this may, in part, explain the phenomenon of coup d'etat in post-independence history, in the post-independence history of Africa. No matter the amount of hypocritical rhetoric about the rationale to assume the reins of power in Africa's interest, the underlying fact is that, or was that, the coup makers only exhibited that they were in control of a machinery to turn Africa into the killing fields. A neocolonialist military cannot save Africa. Power was primarily about having a gun pointed at Africans. You remember the National Liberation Council in Ghana? Who were the guns pointed at? The people. You remember the National Redemption Council of Ghana? They pointed the guns, whilst they were redeeming you, the guns were pointed where? At you. I enjoy those names. You know? Invariably, successful coup makers usually bettered their economic existence as well as buttered their social privileges. and had a recognition of their neo-colonial principles. An analyst stated, the succession of military coups which have in recent years taken place in Africa have exposed the close links between the interests of neocolonialism and the indigenous bourgeoisie. Foreign monopoly capitalists are in close association with local reactionaries and have made use of officers among the armed forces and police in order to frustrate the purposes of the African Revolution. The quote also says, it is common that oppressed people misappropriate and replicate their oppressors' values and behavior. Of course, right now we are having the trial in the Sahel, who are offering us new ideas, but we'll get there, and we'll get there tomorrow, not today. Traore, Niger, and Mali. Very unusual coups in the currency of this African nightmare. Now, there are drone bases in Africa. This is the holy soil of Sobukwe. This is the holy soil of Mugabe. This is the holy soil of Nkrumah. This is the whole, I can go on naming. What are foreign military bases doing on this holy African continent? What are these bases here to serve? Whom are they going to protect you for or against? But they are here. Drones. Drones. I could go into details. And if you read, you'll find them. Western, almost all of them belong to one section of the world. Those who came to abstract your people, those who came to colonize you, and now controlling your capital. What are their military bases doing all over the continent? In Kenya, they have 2. Why? Is anybody going to attack the Kenyans? And you don't think that we are in a nightmarish situation? I like the Americans. So they can't leave one behind. They can't leave anybody behind. Very, very interesting. You think that an American will be here to save you? You think that an Englishman will be here to save you? Look at the French. Égalité, fraternité. What's even the last one? Égalité, fraternité. Yeah, say it. Liberté. At the time they were shouting that and chopping off the necks of their kings, they were busy taking part in the period of enslavement of Africa. To treat them and mistreat them and abuse them in the diaspora. And we don't see it. Something is very fundamentally wrong if you sit in this world and don't look around you. See, going back to Nkrumah again, very funny man. And that speech he gave, very interesting speech on the eve of independence. He says, when the African is given a chance, he will show to the world. You remember a beautiful speech. Who should give the African a chance? Who? The mosquito, which is sucking your blood, should give you a chance so that he or she stops sucking your blood. The vampires, Africans, think we have this resource, and that is why the Academy is here to organize this thought shield for us all in every field of human endeavor. Bioweapons, weaponry, and so on. Who are creating biolabs all over the world in order to send germs or other things to you, bacteria, to kill you, to kill humanity. Who are they? Is Ghana part of this? Having heard of a Ghanaian biologist in this kind of profession, of going to the lab just to find germs that can help kill other human beings in his favor. How? What kind of mind do these people have? Think, Africans. Think. You know, I think there were 3,200 civilian deaths from drones in 2 countries and so on. Read and you'll find, I don't want to go into the geostrategic implications regarding the countries they have chosen as their drone bases. Mali, Burkina Faso is now in trouble. We almost went to fight. They would tell you that government is, that's what they tell you, government of the people, by the people, for the people. ECOWAS almost went to tell people to kill Kanuri, Hausa, this. And when they did, it's the government, it's not me. And they knew that this was generally unpopular. And yet, they would tell you that government is you. Nah, it's not us. You need to go into the meaning of even the word and the idea of government. Infante, very, very interesting. They call government Aban. Aban actually means the castle. And almost everything associated with the word Aban is negative. When you are to Abanim, it means you are in prison. Aban Kaba, handcuffs. Aban Ejuma, what you know as a once year? They carry their chiefs, so. But Aban Ejuma, what you know as a once year? Start thinking, start rethinking. Aban Yedru. If you go into the interior area, say we are Santi and so on, when they are praying, and they are holding the spirit to talk, and Sa is that which does not finish, the eternal, to speak. What they say, Yempe abana manie, Emma aban ombien hen. And you come and tell me that I should vote for something that will be hostile to me, an institution. Take it easy. You need to start thinking African. And then you know the nightmare we are all experiencing. So, resource sovereignty, which is now the new phrase we use, runs counter to the true colonialist objectives of Western foreign policy. So, the shepherd, as it is usually said, always tries to persuade the sheep that their interest and their own are one and the same. The sheep and the shepherd. The shepherd tries to get the sheep. So the sheep, oh, that's my shepherd. It's only using when you get time for slaughtering the sheep, it will do it in no time, but the sheep will follow the shepherd. We maintain that the progenitors are the root cause of and primary sustenance for the poverty, displacement, despair, and violence in Africa over a period of what colonialists plunder. Yesterday I read Lumumba's turn to him. Who are the forces behind Mobutu? Behind Mobutu and Kasavubu and Moise Tshombe? When Sobukwe was caught and put in a jail, Robert Sobukwe, when you read his life about him, it gets to a point, you say, how can some human beings treat another human being like this? Look, if you're not experiencing this nightmare, then I don't know what it is. Quite recently, Captain Traore, Ibrahim Traore, said in 2023 that that year was a year of evaluation, which led them to take important decisions to break through the shackles of slavery, imperialism, and neocolonialism. Traore added that Africa must continue to stand on its own, because you cannot hope to find your lost object by calling for help from the one who stole it from you. What did the rest of the leadership in Africa say? More IMF, more World Bank, more this, more that. What has happened to the whole idea of standing on our feet and doing something for ourselves? Think about it. This is the challenge for you. Me, I'm old, I'm going. But this is the challenge that the Academy has to bequeath to young ones like you so that you become real warriors, warriors of thought, intellectual warriors. George Orwell reminds us that, and I said this in a way earlier, the most effective way to destroy a people is to deny and destroy their own understanding of their history. And these means, disguised as informing and amusing the African people, have only one agenda: Go to the television stations and see what they show you. Analyze it carefully. But we don't. We are to corrupt your understanding of yourself, your reality, and the world, and they implant in the minds of young people ideas and concepts that ultimately lead them to believe in what will happen in the period of political or economic crisis. In 2010, an African resident in the UK wrote, "Why is it always Africa? What is wrong with Africa? Why is it that nothing good comes out of Africa? Anytime you turn on the TV, it is always bad news, hunger, massacre, war, military coup, greed, corruption, child labor, you name it. What at all is wrong with Africa?" An African resident in London, he wrote this down. There's nothing wrong with Africa. It's our head. And those who show these, it's in their interest to show them, because they depress you and frighten you away from Africa. One could critique the lenses this Botokuman is using, the control of and the purpose of the narrative. However, my mind goes to Ayikweama's reflective statement. Laughing at the ignorance of the learned is not a reasonable option, because all Africans are at the bottom of the Berlin hole. All Africans caught in the trap of the intellectual status quo serve a purpose that is not their own. Certainly, platforms such as this cannot be maintaining the intellectual universe needed to make the Berlin system perdure, even as it continues killing Africa. You know, we've experienced what? Please read The Wretched of the Earth. I don't want to give details here. We've experienced aliens compliance order from the Congo all the way to this place. South Africa is being pushed by certain groups to do the same. The whole idea of sovereignty in Africa is something. Now, what has happened to the youth? Somebody who fought for the Mau Mau, Mijua Huruma in Nairobi, one of the biggest slums in Kenya, said, he was disillusioned. He says, this never went as we expected. I'm still bitter when I remember those days of suffering and detention. Of course, the unsightly slums in Africa are actually scared by garbage, alcoholism, drugs, crime, malnutrition, and disintegrating families. However, the real pain that Mijua Huruma said is, I'm equally sad that the generations at present cannot be looked upon to reverse the order. Our youth are sunk into drugs and very much after money. This is evident during elections, where they are offered money to vote for undeserving leaders. This is not Ghana. This is Kenya. Echoing these kind of sentiments, you see the number of young people fleeing, going across the Sahara. And one young boy's letter to his grandmother really got me. He says when he was going, he left a letter for his grandmother, who was unlettered anyway. And the young man is from Guinea. I've taken the decision to risk my life. If I succeed, I do so for myself, my family, and my nation. Because my nation needs my success to help the many of my compatriots who are in a much hopeless situation than I find myself. But if I die, I do so for myself and my family, and not for my nation, because there is nothing in it worth dying for. It provokes one to seek an understanding of the underlying reasons for a young man to voluntarily take the risk of dying in order to embrace servitude. We are all aware that illegal migration into Europe in the main condemns a black man to a state to which may be akin to modern enslavement. Obviously, for the young man, the hope of making a life in one's own country appear to have died. Around 2005, they saw that 47% of those who have left college in Ghana have left here quite recently they published something that said about 30.4, I think Afro-Parameter, 30.4 of the youth in Ghana, for example, have left. Now, what do? You remember the song by a very nice, handsome young boy from my village who sings beautifully, and his lyrics are so deep. And he has a song called Confessions. And somewhere along the line, he shouts, "Erazi Bejisti no." You know, just imagine. Just imagine. Beautiful song. Does it hit you? Somebody is giving up. Let's see, Erazi Bejisti. That's where we are. I think I must be coming close to my whatever. But let me just read you the words of the 47% of college-educated students here, Ghanaians. Before it's too late, because it's already late, these elites, these men of Africa and the third world must come back to who they are, that is, to their societies and to the misery we have inherited. They must understand that the battle for a system of thought at the service, they must understand that the battle for a system of thought at the service of the disinherited masses is not in vain. They must understand, too, that they can only become credible on an international level by being genuinely inventive, that is, by painting a faithful picture of their people. This picture must allow the people to achieve fundamental challenges in the political and social situation. Changes that will allow us to break from the foreign domination exploitation that leave our states no perspective other than bankruptcy. And with the words of this great man, who was named after a place in Ghana and still don't understand why they changed his name, I end today's lecture. Thomas Sankara. Thank you.
Okay, so Nana has delivered this lecture as a historian with dates and with some names. Names I've learned in 1975 when I entered the university. Kobina Sechi, George Grant, you have R.S. Blay, Kesley Hayford, and others. And that's why he made a point yesterday that we should all take history seriously. And he made a very important point today also about the fact that we should take our culture seriously, because if your culture is compromised, then of course the whole society itself will be in danger. And I think that's a very important point. But so, listening to Nana for the past 2 days, well, we had the missed dream. The dream was independence. It came, but we were not prepared. And there were some contradictions, particularly the negativities of colonialism. But in spite of the negativities, in spite of the factors, in spite of the clash between Western culture and values or civilization and African civilization and values, we still had independence. But from there, we came to experiencing the nightmare. And the nightmare, as I said, is a frightening experience. A nightmare is a frightening experience, unpleasant, horrific, and what have you. But the nightmare had, certain ingredients. He mentioned, the tension between Western jurisprudence and African jurisprudence. He mentioned xenophobia, which is in South Africa, but we in this part of the world, we call it aliens compliance order. Then, of course, he mentioned instability, the coup d'etats. But one of the most important nightmare which we have seen is ineffective leadership. And he posed a very important question. Who is benefiting from independence? Who is benefiting from independence? And I think that's a very crucial question we should be thinking about. Who has benefited or who is benefiting from independence? And over here, I would like us to look at the role of leadership and the role of citizens, because it's a two-way affair. If you have weak, irresponsible citizens, then of course you are likely, or you may have irresponsible leaders. Or if you have responsible citizens, you can also have responsible leaders. Or it could be the reverse. And I think we should take the issue of leadership and citizenship seriously. Always we've been pointing, accusing fingers at leadership. Leadership at all levels. I'm talking about political leadership, bureaucratic leadership, corporate leadership, traditional leadership, religious leadership, all the forms of leadership that you can think of. But we're always accusing leadership. But how about citizens? Citizenship, very important. And that leads me to, because Nana also mentioned religion, you see, historians are full of, they deal with several disciplines. I mean, he also sang Bob Marley's thing. He said something about Bob Marley. He also said something about the culture. He also said a lot of things about anthropology and all that. But then one of the things which we also need to look at is how can we change the economy? Because the economy we have inherited is neo-colonial. We have not been able to deal with a neo-colonial economy. So no transformation. So we are talking about how do we transform the neo-colonial economy. Some people refer to it as the Gettysburg economy. Now, one of the last takeaways I would want to flag is the whole issue of the role of the state and government in all these things. And we have a case now that, well, in Africa, we don't need the states. So, because this is what the neoliberal or the free market or the market system will say, that, well, you don't need the role of the state. But if you look at the Asian tigers, South Korea, Singapore, what have you, the state is very important. The state has adopted protectionist measures to even protect infant industries. But in Africa, the whole issue of we don't need the state, the private sector should take over what the state used to do. But meanwhile, the private sector is weak. And I think in this lecture, if you are talking about the whole issue of the nightmare, the experience of the nightmare, one of the things that we need to flag is how can we make the state stronger to be able to perform its responsibilities? For me, the state has failed in this nightmare. The government, he mentioned of the government, Daban, what have you. The state has failed in its responsibilities. And how can we bring back the state? And I think this is a very crucial question that we need to address. My final point, whether we like it or not, we have achieved independence. We need to move on. And Nana has been optimistic. And I'm sure tomorrow he'll give us an authentic African paradigm. But I think that as we go along, as we move on, we should also be thinking of how to reconstruct politics and governance in Africa. Nana, on that note, would like to please let's join me to thank Nana again for the lecture. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a good summary of the lecture. We have some acknowledgements here. First, we'll start with, she told me her name, but I've slipped. She's the daughter of J.B. DANQUAH. Is that correct? Iris DANQUAH. She says she has some other siblings, but they are not in the country now. But she's the only one. You are all acknowledged. We cannot go through, so we appreciate your being here. We thank all of you. But we'd like to acknowledge our students. I have a list here. We have Accra City Campus of the University of Ghana. Where are they? Oh, great. Good. You're most welcome. And then also we have Accra College of Education. I suppose they are here. Yeah, you're most welcome. And then there's this big group. Could they be Accra Academy? Okay, Accra Academy then. Yes. Understand, we also have Accra Girls Senior High School. Are they here? Where are they? They have not. Oh, they are at the back there. Oh, yes. Oh, please wave. Yes. Good, you're most welcome. We also would like to acknowledge the support from NPA, who have given us some finances to support GAAS, that's the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences 2024 public events. And that includes this series of lectures that we are conducting. It's not just this, but some of the events of the academy. Like, I understand yesterday the CEO was here, but he wasn't acknowledged. If he's here, we'd like to see, or any person from NPA. All right, okay, but we still like to thank them. Is the acting executive secretary here? Is there anything else that we need to? Yes. That's all. Okay. Thank you very much. We'd like also to thank again Nana for the lecture and Chairman for ably chairing the function. Thank you very much. I wish you a pleasant evening. Sankofa. Please, we will appreciate you all coming back tomorrow for the third and final installment of this beautiful lecture series that's going on. We will expect you. Thank you very much. Tomorrow at the same time, and enjoy yourself. Thank you very much.